Tonight, not quite business as usual, but Victoria's hospitality industry is set to take patrons again in June.
People will be able to go and have a meal, and if they choose to have a beer with that, then that's all good. But this has got to be done safely. It's got to be done responsibly.
Also tonight, AFL player Jack Stephen in hospital with a stab wound. Serious concerns about patient safety at a regional Victorian hospital, and how ISO baking has spelt a flour shortage in kitchens across the country. Hello and welcome to ABC News Sunday. I'm Tamara Oudyn. It's been a long time between drinks, but there's now a plan to reopen the hospitality industry in Victoria. Venues will start to open again next month, as long as they follow strict rules. From the 1st of June, pubs, cafes and restaurants will be allowed to admit up to 20 customers at a time. By the 22nd of June, that could increase to 50. And if all's tracking well, that could then go up to a limit of 100 in the second half of July. Nicole Asher reports.
It's been a long time between drinks at Victorian venues.
The pub is shut. That doesn't mean you can have all your mates round to home and get on the beers. People will be able to go and have a meal, and if they choose to have a beer with that, then that's all good. But this has got to be done safely. It's got to be done responsibly.
It's too little and it's too late. There are some businesses that will fail because Daniel Andrews is slower than the rest of the country in opening up to restaurants, cafes and hotels.
But many in the hospitality industry are raising their glasses to today's announcement.
I think it'll be another adjustment to what we've been trying to do now, but it's really good news.
We'll reopen all our pubs, even though the capacity is only 20. It's just positive to get the staff back to work, give people the opportunity to catch up with their mates again over a beer.
There'll be challenges for the bigger venues, but the announcement today will allow us on the 1st of June to open our doors and begin a pathway to recovery.
And it has customers eagerly anticipating a return to some sort of normality.
We spend a lot of time coming out on Saturday mornings and going out for dinner on Saturday night, so I'm looking forward to getting out there again.
Venues will be governed by tough regulations. Tables will have to be spaced 1.5 metres apart and only one person per 4 square metres of floor space. There'll also be extra cleaning and staff health screening and temperature checks.
To even get into a venue, you'll need to supply identifying details so you can be contacted if a case of coronavirus is detected. And due to social distancing rules, it'll be some time yet before you can have one of these at the bar.
This is a significant announcement, but it is based on a continuation of people getting tested and a continuation of those results remaining stable.
230,000 Victorians have been tested, with another 7 cases confirmed since yesterday. Those numbers will dictate exactly when crowds will roll back into Victoria's hospitality venues. Nicole Asher, ABC News, Melbourne.
Geelong midfielder Jack Stephen was hospitalised with stab wounds to the chest overnight. He presented at a Melbourne hospital with serious injuries and is currently in a stable condition. 30-year-old Stephen joined the Cats from St Kilda last year, where he was a 4-time best and fairest winner. The Geelong Football Club says it doesn't know how the injuries occurred. Police are investigating the incident. A man is dead and another is fighting for life after a violent incident in Melbourne's north. Police arrived at the scene in Epping last night and found a 37-year-old man with significant injuries. He died at the scene. The second man was taken to hospital by a friend, where he remains in a critical condition. Homicide detectives are investigating, but police won't say how the man died. Australia's push for an independent inquiry into the origin of the COVID-19 outbreak has had a significant boost, with scores of other countries jumping on board. The coalition of 62 states comes as Trade Minister Simon Birmingham warns China is becoming a risky prospect for Australian businesses. As political editor Andrew Probyn explains, Australia's souring relationship with Beijing might complicate the economic recovery once the health crisis is over.
On a suburban cricket oval is a marvel of modern medicine, a pop-up COVID clinic right next to Canberra Hospital. It went from this to this in just 35 days.
It was seen as an insurance policy. It's one of the few buildings where, we hope no one ever needs to use it.
In fact, there's a good chance this 50-bed hospital is never used because the COVID curve's under control. The shutdowns made that possible at enormous expense, the way out of the economic crisis getting harder.
The call ought to be returned, David.
Trade Minister Simon Birmingham's confirmed his Chinese counterpart is still refusing to pick up the phone.
It's not a reflection upon the Australian government.
Beijing putting Australia in the diplomatic deep freeze for demanding an international inquiry into the origin of the coronavirus outbreak. China's slapped bans on 4 Australian abattoirs and is poised to stop barley exports too. At least one premier's offering to act as an envoy.
Considering the long-standing trading relationship Western Australia's had going back many decades, I'm happy to help.
Advice flowing thick and fast within government too, some from its own backbench, not entirely welcome.
Being so entangled with an authoritarian regime has left our nation open to economic blackmail and boycotts.
But the Australian government's frustrated with its biggest trading partner.
I would expect that many Australian businesses would start to consider whether the risk profile has changed and may therefore look at other markets.
Diversification takes time. It takes years and years, decades, but the work must start now.
China accounts for 36% of Australia's exports, more than double the second biggest. So if Beijing does play hardball, it could cause significant economic pain. But having made its case for an independent inquiry into where the virus started, Australia can't and won't back down, however uncomfortable. That discomfort, though, might be shared. Confirmation late today that more than 60 countries are set to back an inquiry through the World Health Organisation. Andrew Proven, ABC News, Canberra.
Something many people have had to contend with during coronavirus restrictions is the cancellation of long-awaited holidays. And unfortunately, getting a refund isn't straightforward. Alison Zhao reports.
For a travel-loving couple, it was the stuff of dreams.
The best and most luxurious train in the world.
But this South African odyssey never happened.
Really leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Don and Bridget Bernard booked a $30,000 adventure last year.
And that looked amazing.
They've been refunded a third of their ticket, but $20,000 remains outstanding, offered as a credit to be used on the same package at a later date.
We don't know how our own health condition will be next year. I think there's too many ifs and buts about it.
The travel industry says money is tied up in a complex global system of suppliers. Airlines, hotels, restaurants and local attractions, all of which are feeling the pinch.
In that entire supply chain, there are contracts that include non-refundable deposits.
The terms and conditions for each holiday are different, so there's no general answer to what customers are legally entitled to.
It's not that easy to just simply get a refund. It's not the consumer's fault, it's not the travel agent's fault, it's not the tour operator's fault.
The ACCC says it doesn't have the power to enforce contractual rights, and it says it's not easy to determine whether a contract has been frustrated because Australian consumer law provides for unforeseen circumstances, like travel being cancelled due to government restrictions. The Bernards say there's been nowhere to turn.
It seems to me, anyway, that it's deliberately made difficult so they don't have to give you answers.
It's been stalling, waiting for us to just give up and walk away.
But that's unlikely. Alison Zhao, ABC News.
While the latest unemployment numbers show the biggest monthly rise on record, the impact on Australians is even greater than the official rate suggests. About 600,000 people lost their jobs in April and unemployment hit 6.2%. But when you include the millions of workers on the JobKeeper wage subsidy, more than half of the population is receiving help. And as Alan Kohler explains, high unemployment is likely to last for many years.
On Thursday, we learnt that the unemployment rate had increased from 5.2 to 6.2%, or 104,000 extra people. But 600,000 jobs disappeared. Commonwealth Bank told us this week via this graph that almost all of the growth in the money flowing into its customers' bank accounts at the moment is coming as government benefits rather than wages. These are all some kind of unemployment payment, either the dole, which is called the job seeker allowance now, or the new thing called JobKeeper allowance. The Treasurer said this week that 6 million people are covered by JobKeeper and 1.6 million are getting Job Seeker, which more or less adds up to what CBA has found. But only 823,300 of them are counted by the ABS as unemployed, even though they're not actually employed. If all those people were counted as unemployed, the unemployment rate would be, well, 58%. Thank goodness they're not. Imagine the national despondency if the ABS reported that the unemployment rate was twice what it got to in the Great Depression. Why aren't they counted? Well, because those getting JobKeeper aren't unemployed. And for those getting Job Seeker to be counted as unemployed, they would have to have been actively looking for work. And since the amount has suddenly doubled and is now enough to live on, a lot of unemployed people aren't bothering to look because they know there aren't any jobs anyway. So, lies, damn lies, and statistics, as Mark Twain once said. But the real world is places like this. The arts and recreation centres have seen massive declines in available work, and employment in restaurants and accommodation has collapsed as well. The government is budgeting for the temporary employment benefits to go for 6 months, and then for the private sector to bounce back and lead job creation. But will it in 6 months? A lot of private sector outfits are stuffed, never to lead job creation again. And for that reason, unemployment is a scourge that lasts. In the last recession, the unemployment rate went above 8% in December 1990, and it didn't go below it again until October 1997, almost 7 years. And this recession looks worse than that one.
A senior doctor has resigned from a regional hospital northwest of Melbourne over serious concerns about patient safety. The doctor believes a 2019 stillbirth linked to the Maryborough Hospital may have been preventable and followed 3 near-fatal incidents involving babies in the maternity ward. It comes almost 5 years after revelations of a cluster of potentially avoidable baby deaths at another hospital in Bacchus Marsh. Charlotte King reports.
Dr Jim Sharples was 15 kilometres from the Maryborough Hospital when he got the call in February 2017. A pregnant mother had been waiting in the ward for more than an hour. Her baby, 1 day off full term, was barely moving.
This trace had needed to be acted on immediately. The time delay was just costing more and more trouble for this baby and potential death.
Another GP obstetrician working on the ward had asked the midwife to fax the baby's fetal trace to Melbourne for a review before he knocked off for the day. Dr Sharples says the GP obstetrician had a duty of care to act.
The thing that shocked me about that is, if that is an end-stage trace, why are you delaying with a fax? This mother requires immediate treatment.
The baby girl was born through a crash caesarean and survived, but Dr Sharples says she never needed to come so close to death.
What's your biggest fear to come out of that?
It's going to happen again.
In October 2019, it did happen again, but this time the result was catastrophic. Several hours after a pregnant 21-year-old woman came to the health service with severe abdominal pain, she lost her baby in the back of a road ambulance. The woman, who was 30 weeks pregnant, attended the clinic beside the hospital at 3 o'clock that afternoon, but was sent home with Panadol. 2 hours later, she was rushed back to the hospital in an ambulance. The GP obstetrician on ward duty examined her and put her on a monitor with a midwife before he went home. Within half an hour, the midwife was on the phone to the obstetrician. The baby was in distress. Records seen by the ABC reveal that she was instructed not to contact the statewide emergency transfer service for mothers and babies, known as Piper. Instead, the woman was to be transferred via road ambulance to Ballarat. It was another 90 minutes before paramedics arrived to collect her. Somewhere on the country road between Maryborough and Ballarat, the baby's heart stopped beating.
Once again, you've got a scenario where a midwife has correctly identified a problem with a trace and the GP obstetrician is failing to act on that. The time delays in that case could have led to a preventable death of that fetus.
Maryborough's maternity unit was reviewed in May 2017 by Safer Care Victoria, the state's hospital safety monitor, after 3 near-miss births. Their report highlighted a series of safety and quality issues that needed to be addressed. It warned of the lessons learned from the perinatal death disaster in Bacchus Marsh and of the high risk of potential adverse outcome and suboptimal care processes.
It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for the community, it's a tragedy for the mother, it's a tragedy for the whole system.
Professor Stephen Duckett's 2016 report into the state's health system came off the back of the baby deaths in Bacchus Marsh and prompted enormous reforms. He says he's staggered by what he's described as another system failure.
Why is it that the escalation processes weren't working properly? What was it about the culture of this particular place that failed? Because it doesn't have to fail, it doesn't fail in every small rural hospital, but it did at this place.
He says it's also a failure of Safer Care Victoria.
There's no point putting a recommendation on a piece of paper if nothing happens.
In a statement, Safer Care Victoria said Maryborough's hospital has worked proactively to implement the recommendations in the 2017 report and that it's satisfied with its safety standards. The women at the centre of this story were too traumatised to speak about their experience publicly. One of them told us she doesn't think it's safe for women to continue to give birth at the Maryborough Hospital, particularly in an emergency. Neither has been given an explanation as to what went so wrong. Dr Jim Sharples says health authorities have not responded to the safety concerns with enough urgency.
Well, quite clearly we're not seeing that in this case. I'm not sure how that's achieving a goal of increasing safety if we don't address it in a timely fashion.
The ABC contacted the Maryborough District Health Service and the doctor with detailed questions. Neither offered a response. Charlotte King, ABC News, Maryborough.
Victoria has seen a dramatic spike in applications from trans and gender diverse people to change the sex on their birth certificates. It follows changes to the law, which came into effect this month, scrapping the requirement for applicants to first have gender reassignment surgery. James Hancock reports.
Brooke was born biologically male and endured the pain of not fitting in at high school in country Victoria.
Name called, spat on, hit, glared at, groped, whole range of things.
Her life has changed immeasurably since moving to Melbourne. She's made new friends and is studying law and science at university. But her birth certificate is stuck in the past, stating she's male. But it shouldn't be that way for much longer.
When I got everything kind of sent away, I think I just sat back and just kind of let out a sigh of relief.
Brooke has applied to change the sex on her birth certificate after law reforms came into effect this month, scrapping the need to first have sex affirmation or gender reassignment surgery.
Someone assigned male, if I was going to have that surgery, is around $15,000 or $16,000, not covered by Medicare and or private, to have that done in Australia, and much bigger for those assigned female at birth.
Brooke says the reforms will make everyday tasks involving identification documents easier, like getting a job.
You were outed to anybody. It didn't matter what your presentation was. It didn't matter who you were or who you wanted to be.
It's not necessarily intentional discrimination on the part of a medical service or something like that. It's just that sometimes people will do, a double take when they see that somebody's identification is clearly in a different gender to the one that they're presenting in.
The law amendments provide unprecedented choice in how individuals can express their gender. While male or female are expected to be the most common options, applicants can also select their own terms, such as gender diverse, non-binary, gender queer, or agender.
I know that hundreds and hundreds of people will be utilising the new change in legislation.
Births, Deaths and Marriages Victoria says in the past fortnight it's received 50 applications for a change of record. That compares to 40 in all of 2019 and just 24 in 2015. The LGBTIQ Legal Service is tomorrow holding its second Change Your ID Day, this time online because of the coronavirus. Given the reforms, it's shaping as the biggest one yet. James Hancock, ABC News, Melbourne.
A wave of protests against coronavirus restrictions is sweeping across Europe. despite the easing of lockdown measures in many countries, there's growing frustration around the economic impact. For many, life has become unbearable and they're now more emboldened in pushing for a speedy return to normal.
They've been labelled COVIDiots, but their numbers continue to swell at protests across Europe.
I'm a human being and I would like to live and breathe without a face mask.
Despite some measures being relaxed, hundreds of Germans gathered for a second week, undeterred by warnings of a new wave of infections. In the worst-hit European countries, there's growing anger at the handling of the crisis. Banging pots and defying police, demonstrators in Spain called for their government to resign.
I have young sons and they are the ones that will suffer from this. It's not fair. We have to leave them a Spain that our parents left us.
Italian hospitality workers stood silently, fearing the slow death of restaurants and cafes due to the restrictions they still face.
The government is taking us on the road of certain failure, because to reopen today, it would be only a very sad and bitter failure for everybody.
Simply putting bread on the table was front of mind for protesters in Poland, who defied a police ban on gatherings to call for restrictions to be lifted. The growing mood of defiance also spilled over to the United Kingdom, where police moved on protesters in Hyde Park, arresting 19 people for deliberately breaking social distancing guidelines.
I wouldn't go home because I want my freedom of speech.
London police dismissed them as only a small group, but as fear of the virus diminishes, anger at restrictions is set to grow. Michael Troy, ABC News.
Back home now, and they have no work, no assistance and no way to get home. Now many international students are going hungry. So a culinary school in Melbourne, which had to close because of the pandemic, has teamed up with a charity to help feed its struggling students and has dished out more than 7,000 meals in the past month. Amelia Terzon reports.
This private TAFE's industrial kitchen is usually a learning space for international students. But now it's a makeshift soup kitchen churning out free meals for its own pupils.
I lost everything. I lost my job. I tried to come back to my country, but it was impossible.
In the line for food outside the Melbourne school are many other stories of desperation. The TAFE's international students are not eligible for welfare payments like AusStudy or JobKeeper during the COVID-19 shutdowns. This young couple have no way to pay their rent and are being threatened with eviction.
There we go, thank you. Enjoy.
I felt so hopeless, like I didn't know what to do.
We don't know anyone else here, so there are no other options.
We're hearing stories of our staff members putting money into bank accounts of students so they can pay their rent, and it's just heartbreaking.
There's been some initiatives for these students announced in recent weeks, such as one-off payments of $1,000 from the Victorian government. But none of these students have actually seen that money in their bank accounts yet. And their TAFE says what's really needed is for the federal government to offer them up JobSeeker.
Even if it's a reduced payment, just something just so they can keep a roof over their head.
The federal government is standing firm and says it's already helping the students by letting them work longer hours than usually allowed on their visas.
The main problem about being on a student visa here is that you fall between the cracks.
But small acts of charity can make a big difference. Amelia Terzon, ABC News, Melbourne.
The panic buying that happened at the outset of the pandemic and the subsequent popularity of so-called ISO baking left flour somewhat hard to come by for a while there. Milling companies found it difficult to keep up with demand. But as Landline's Pip Courtney reports, Australia's biggest miller is determined not to get caught out again.
When COVID-19 forced families to stay home, many became creative in the kitchen. In Brisbane, the Cole family bakes most days.
It's been really fun for us to do something together, to experiment.
Harrison and Mia have loved it.
Give it to your friends and they text back saying, "Oh, it's so good, thank you." It's a good feeling to have.
Finding flour, though, has been hard, with supermarket shelves bare for weeks.
Is that going to be enough, do you think?
Milling companies were stunned by the spike in sales.
The retail has just been ridiculously high, about 70% over normal volume.
Manildra Group is Australia's biggest flour producer and has moved its main New South Wales mill to a 24/7 operation and hired extra staff.
That's 10 weeks ago and we're still doing that now and endeavouring to supply all of the supermarkets and people with the flour that they'd like to have.
ISO bakings put a strain on the country's wheat supply lines, but new equipment will see Manildra Group produce an extra 50 million 1 kilo bags of flour a year from July. Toowoomba-based organic miller Kyella Foods has hired extra staff and run double shifts to keep up.
In March and April, we're about 300% up on those retail type products. People are falling in love with cooking again, and it's great.
Keen cooks can look forward to full shelves very soon. Pip Courtney, ABC News.
As the country slowly reopens, many Australians have been enjoying a glimpse of their old lives. But of course, it's not at all what we know as normal. All types of places are having to change the way they operate. For tonight's special report, we take a trip around the country to see how life is evolving. It's time to get out from under the doona. National Cabinet has laid out Australia's three-phase plan to lifting restrictions. But the reality of putting that into practice is only just setting in. Welcome to a day in the post-shutdown world. It's 6 a.m. in Brisbane and fitness buffs are back in the gym.
The gym is part of the daily routine for many Australians, and if you're like me, you can't wait to get back to it. But when the doors finally reopen, it's likely to look a little different.
Boot camps in the fresh air are likely to be a continuing feature, while inside, Joanne Johnson's preparing for when her members can return.
I think it'll be a new normal.
It's imagined the gym will have a cap on the number of people based on its floor space. And once you're in, that floor space will be clearly divided to keep gym goers socially distant at all times.
Members must book into class. We will then be able to allocate the equipment needed by that member.
It's not an option to share weights, and cleanliness is key. You may have added responsibilities each time you come to work out.
Things like having your own equipment allocated to you, it's also likely you'll be responsible for cleaning the gear as well.
Each space will be allocated with a container, obviously our detergent and their cloth.
Outdoor exercise may still be the preference. Just 30% of people say they'll go back to a gym anytime soon. But swimming laps at the local pool is still in limbo. Many operators can't wear the costs of making things COVID safe, while the number of lanes are limited.
It's 9 a.m. in Sydney and thousands of workers are arriving back at the office.
Office blocks across the city have been empty for months now, but they're about to come to life. This 39-storey office in North Sydney is normally home to 3,500 workers. The problem starts even before you reach your office floor. Most lifts are only a few metres wide and long, so adhering to social distancing rules means only 2 people are allowed in a lift at a time. Let's do a rough calculation. With 3,500 people in the building, 2 per lift means more than 1,700 trips. Each return trip takes on average 2 minutes. With 12 lifts, it means it will take 5 hours to get everyone upstairs. And once you're up here, what will the workplace look like in a post-pandemic era?
It'll be very different. I think the fact that we've worked so well flexibly for so long now, people will insist upon that flexibility. Some people will want to work from home, some people will want to be in the office, some people might want to be somewhere in between.
The traditional 9-to-5 workday is unlikely to stay.
We want a staggered start time as well, so we don't want everyone turning up on the 1st of June at 9 o'clock. We want people to come in dribs and drabs at different points of the day, and I think that will be a permanent feature of the workplace of the future.
There'll be specific entry and exit points in each room to ensure one-way flow of people throughout the office. Some businesses have even refitted their whole office space, installing Perspex barriers and removing computers where desks are too close.
So the 6 feet office is a concept that can help businesses prepare for a safe return to work. So when you enter your work zone, you go to your desk, and around your desk there is a round sticker. The sticker tells you what your safe zone is. It's a reminder for colleagues to keep that 1.5 metre distance.
The communal kitchen area will also have to change. The recommendation is not to share the microwave, cutlery or crockery. When lunchtime hits, finding food outside the office will also be a different experience.
It's lunchtime in Perth, and all those office workers will be ready to eat.
Food halls have been deserted since the lockdown measures started. But with office blocks and shopping centres reopening, the lights will come back on.
At this Korean takeaway, getting the wok fired back up is an exciting step.
But I'm really happy to see people again.
Precautions are being put in place. McDonald's in the US just released guidelines for its stores. Self-service drinks machines are out, and those self-service kiosks will be turned off too. Bathrooms will be cleaned every 30 minutes. Tables wiped down between every customer. In hospitality, hygiene is the safest bet.
So I'm hiding my mouth and nose so I can keep distance from customers anyway. And I also hand sanitizers ready. Whenever I touch the cash, I wash.
Takeaway will be encouraged to avoid overcrowding.
But when dining in is allowed again, things are going to look a little different. This is how many tables would normally be here at Market Hall. Moving ahead, that's going to have to reduce, and they'll be left with just this.
Grabbing a quick bite is going to take a bit of planning.
Even after work drinks won't be the same. It's 5 p.m. in Darwin and the beer is flowing again.
Here in the Northern Territory, pubs reopened on Friday, and what's happening here could be a sign of things to come across the country.
To be able to enjoy a cold one, there's a couple of rules that need to be followed. There's a 2-hour time limit at all venues. Like cafes, all tables need to be at least 1.5 metres apart. If you want alcohol, you'll need to buy food, and people must be seated for all food and drinks.
You know, I think about our poor brothers and sisters down there in Sydney and Melbourne, and, you know, trying to work out how just 10 people in a restaurant's going to work. And here we are going, how are we going to make only 10 on a table work, you know?
Well, going to the pub isn't exactly what it used to be. After weeks of lockdowns, just spending time out with friends feels like a cause for celebration.
Yeah, I'm really actually surprised because I thought it would be like a lot more stricter or just like a lot more not as relaxed.
Beer out of a keg rather than a stubby.
And it seems the proof is in the pint. It's estimated 1,000 kegs were used this opening weekend in the NT. That's 50,000 litres or 100,000 schoons.
As if all the changes so far aren't enough, getting home presents just as many challenges. The daily commute in Melbourne is going to look a lot different. Staggering start and finish times, putting limits on passenger numbers on trains, trams and buses, and extensive cleaning and sanitising will be the new normal. 70% of Australians have said they'd be nervous about getting on public transport after the pandemic. Ending the shutdown is just the first step. The way we live has changed for good. With so many people hesitant to use public transport and the roads becoming congested with cars once more, cycling is surging in popularity. Advocates are hoping that it'll be a permanent boost, but are calling for changes to cities and towns to make them more accommodating to bikes. David Mark reports.
Krista Shearer rode her bike to work this week for the first time in 9 years.
It was amazing. It was fast. It was lovely to feel the wind through my hair, and it was yeah, it was good not to be on public transport.
The Sydney-based Recruiter is one of tens of thousands of Australians creating an unprecedented surge in cycling's popularity.
There is a silver lining, and it is that people are rediscovering the joy of being out with their family, whether it's on bikes or walking around their local areas.
And not just rediscovering. Thousands of Australians are getting on bikes for the first time as shops report a doubling in average sales.
We've really seen an explosion in families riding, so it's been a fantastic picture to watch families walk in, a father and mother walk in and walk out with 4 bikes.
It's evident on the cycle lanes of Australian cities, where numbers of riders have jumped by between 50 and 300%. But it's the lack of cars which has been the biggest change to Australia's cities and towns. The question is, what happens now that people are starting to go back to work?
There is an enormous tsunami of problems coming out of COVID to rebuild our economy. It is that public transport will not be able to carry the people that it normally carries.
But there's a catch.
If everyone gets into their car, the roads won't move.
It's why some cities are taking action. London will extend its car-free zone into one of the largest in the world to make it safer for cyclists and pedestrians. Krista Shearer says her experience of riding to work was a good one, but there are concerns that other new cyclists won't find it so easy.
The increase in people walking and riding has highlighted the lack of infrastructure that we have.
And this is what frustrates cyclists so much, a dedicated cycle lane on a busy road that suddenly stops.
What will happen is people who've bought all these bicycles and they thought, oh, I could try my ride to work, they'll do it once, they'll get a horrible scare or they'll get knocked off their bike and they won't ride again.
Which is why We Ride's Stephen Hodge is pushing to rapidly gear up Australia's cities and towns with temporary cycle lanes, as Berlin has just done.
They can be put in place within days. If there are multi-lane roads, a lane can be devoted to a cycleway.
And then make a permanent change.
It is the time that we must take some steps to make sure we allow people to keep riding, keep healthy, keep active.
Australian governments are still weighing up the options, but there is a mood to seize the moment and remake our cities. David Mark, ABC News.
Top flight football has returned with the resumption of the German Bundesliga. 6 games were played as the competition became the first of the major European leagues to resume during the coronavirus pandemic. Most players followed the social distancing guidelines during goal-scoring celebrations, but some couldn't contain their excitement at being back on the pitch. The players did their best to generate their own atmosphere without spectators.
What everybody misses is the energy which a stadium has if it's sold out or if it's a full crowd. This is what everybody misses.
The English Premier League is expected to return next month. Time for the weather now. And it was dry and chilly overnight, with most places getting down to between 0 and 3 degrees. -1 was the low at Mount Hotham and Coldstream. After morning frosts and fog patches across most of the state today, it was generally sunny with light winds. Temperatures were close to the May average, a little higher in alpine areas. Mildura was warmest with a top of 21. In Melbourne, it was gorgeous today. We reached our high of 18.5 degrees at around 2 o'clock this afternoon, and outside now it's 10. Interstate today, Brisbane had showers. It was sunny in Adelaide and mostly sunny in the other capitals. The satellite image is showing cloud along the New South Wales and Queensland coasts and over parts of WA. A high to our east will keep a ridge over Victoria tonight and tomorrow, and a cold front will move in from the Bight late Tuesday. Showers are expected in most states tomorrow except South Australia. For the capital cities, it'll be sunny in Darwin, mostly sunny in Adelaide and Hobart, partly cloudy in Perth and Sydney, and there'll be a few showers in Brisbane. Back home, there'll be early fog and local frost once again, but mainly in the central and eastern areas. That'll clear to another generally dry, mild and mostly sunny day. On the bays, 10-knot variable winds will tend northerly to 20 knots and waves won't top a metre. The Bureau has issued a frost warning for most districts. Monday in Melbourne will be cold and foggy to start with, then mostly sunny with a top of 19, down to just 5 tonight. And looking ahead, late showers on Tuesday, 19, and they'll continue through Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and Saturday with lower temperatures. And that's it for this evening's bulletin. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow night from 7. Till then, good night.